Welcome to the Talkoffame podcast. It's crazy to me that, 2023 is almost over, which is insane. I feel like it was just January 1st, 2 days ago, which is absolutely insane how 2023 flew by. But with this entire year, it really brought so amazing things for the podcast. And so you could probably tell if you've been a listener for a while, but with this today's guest, she has been doing so many amazing things. But as you might wonder who today's guest is, we have Janice Taylor, who's born and raised by a single mom with loving support from families all over the world in Saskatchewan. Is that how you say it, Janice?
Saskatchewan.
It was Saskatchewan. Ooh, it sounds like it
Saskatchewan.
sounds like
Yes.
a French or like Greece or something type of
It's
name.
it's actually, I believe, an indigenous word, Saskatchewan.
Ooh,
Uh,
really? Like that's
yeah,
I've
I'm not,
never heard of that name. Like that's I
but
sound
yeah,
like something
so
like
it's a province in the middle of Canada. Essentially, like you looked at North Dakota and looked north, you'd hit Saskatchewan,
ooh.
basically.
I
Hmm.
have to check that out once we head off of this one.
Yeah,
But you
yeah, it's
emerged
in the
from
middle.
tough circumstances, growing up in indigenous communities and half towns and the streets. These circumstances laid the foundation to the development of a 30-year study asking one question: can you really heal? Which is a great question, which I literally just started asking myself last week. That's FYI. But
Okay.
her journey took her from the pharmaceutical industry, studying drugs of a different kind, to the invisible drug of the tech industry, where she spent the last 15 years. All this led her to build her own theory of how people heal, with the special thesis that early trauma before a 10th birthday, which impacts 99% of the world and shows up in all places of our life. From
Mhm.
addiction from addictions to relationships to mental health, and also pain would doubtly manifest through all aspects of our lives. She also created and launched fundraised for different startups, and she launched AHHA Healing. She started her tech career at the Oprah Winfrey Show, and finally is the author of the Wisdom.Soul.Startup. I know that is seriously a long intro, Janice, but I'm super excited to chat with you on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking.
Cheers. Well, thank you for having me. This is so awesome.
Thank you so much. And I know this is like the same, like just like, okay, well, why is she asking about the beginning of the career, the beginning of the podcast? Yeah, but in case people are wondering, like when you start out, like especially with the Oprah Winfrey Show, with how big and popular it was and still is to today, like once you hear, they're like, oh my gosh, how did she land at like a job at Oprah Winfrey Show with the
It's
like how
pretty
with how big
crazy.
Oprah is? But like, how did you land and start your tech career at the Oprah Winfrey
You
Show?
know, it's interesting because you're probably again of a generation that has only ever had technology, right? You
Yeah.
probably knew it, got an iPad, had connections, grew up in technology. But I was of the generation before technology. But then I saw when people started to get cell phones and then we started to get Facebook and social media, I started to notice that people were starting to change. And I was like, wow, people aren't in the park as much. They're not getting out of the car. And my kids were really little at the time. And I thought, well, no one's really talking to each other. And I thought it was bizarre because we never saw people looking down on our phones. Like that was not something we grew up with. Like people walked, they were outside and you knew everyone in the neighborhood I grew up in. So when I saw that, I was really concerned. And so I went home with this feeling of like my girls were 5 and 2 at the time. It's 2009. And I was like, this is going to be a problem. And so I Googled how to make a tech company. And I didn't know how to make a tech company, but I felt like I had to make a tech company. If I was going to solve something and protect my kids online, I thought I should have a tech company. I should understand how it's made. And I wanted to know the construction of it. And then lo and behold, right after I did that, I just wrote Oprah and said, like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go into the tech industry so I can understand it. And 3 days later, I had a call from the Oprah show. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Chicago. And that's basically how I launched my foray into technology, was at Oprah.
Ooh, that's actually
Yeah.
so great. Like,
Yeah,
like it's like especially with the 2009, I like seriously remember I was only about 3 at the time, but when I remember like around that age, around that, when technology started, like I just remember and like phones really wasn't really part of my childhood. Even though it was starting, I was still on my phone, but not as much like as I do today, especially being on social media and doing podcasting and releasing these videos and audios to the world. I kind of had to get on social media, right? But it's like we're starting a tech company in 2009 when that like social media and even phones were starting to kind of build. Like that's when really iPhones and all upgrades coming
Yes.
out about every year or every other year. Like that's when it really started. And like especially having your kids so young, like
Yeah.
like it's like great to really build yourself even with having your kids so young, because
Yeah,
like with me, like I didn't really have social media growing up. Of course, I
for
did have social
sure.
media, but it's
But
like
then you
I
eventually
was so
sort of
young.
got the cell phone, and in 2012 I moved to Silicon Valley. So I literally packed up my life and I moved to Silicon Valley, and I was like, wow, now I want to know and be in the valley in California, how they're making tech companies. And I was going, because I was from Canada, I was picked out of Canada to get sort of an inside look as like the future of technology from my perspective, and they actually picked quite a few women. So I was in like Facebook campus and Apple campus and H&P campus, and we didn't go to Snapchat because I was in Venice, but we went to all the major platforms like Google campus. And all I could think about the entire time was like, this is going to go sideways. Like 2012 was kind of when everybody started to move onto a mobile. And I was at Facebook and they were like, well, how do we take our laptop and put it onto the phone? And they were so excited as a group, like, oh, every kid's going to be able to have a computer in their pocket. And I was like, oh my God, no, like, no, because as a mom, I was concerned about it. But with a background in psychology, I knew that this would be like an invisible drug. Like eventually you'd go on it a little bit and then you'd be on it a bit more and then you'd want to have it all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
like the way that they had built it to hook you into it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
built in its construction that way. And that was disturbing to me. So I went there and basically was like a little bit of rage against the machine of like, this is going to be bad. Like, this is going to be bad for kids. No one believed me, of course, but it was.
Yeah, it's great that you realize that early on, because of course, like social media grows every single day. It really grows every single day on people because of course, as a 17-year-old teenager
Yeah.
and a junior in high school, with being a junior in high school, like phones are the only thing we could do to communicate with each other outside of school. And
Yeah.
sometimes I see a little bit more that schools are like most of the cases in-person schools are on their phones,
Right.
especially in our local districts. I'm like thinking to myself, like, are you supposed to be learning
Well,
in
yeah,
person
like even your
school?
teachers, if they're being honest, like how many teachers are on the side, scroll, right? Like, they're not supposed to be on their phones either, but I'm gonna bet there's a lot of teachers that are like under the desk during exam time on their phones too, even though they're telling kids not to be on their phones. So kind of like it's not just kids that it kind of bit everybody and took everybody away in a storm. And if you look at what's happening on TikTok, for example, now, right? It changes the way you see the world, and
Mhm.
it's actually in its design. Like what shocked me moving to Silicon Valley was knowing this. I have a psychology background, so knowing what social experiments and psychological experiments can be done on humans in back in the day, and then seeing this combined with new technologies it still is very disturbing to me, because it actually changes how you see the world and how you respond emotionally, to the point that you don't even know you're on it. It's like
Mhm.
that's what's so kind of insidious about why I call it the invisible drug. is because most people don't even know they're high. And they are technically in their being having a fogged perception of what they're seeing or what they're reading. Like you could read, yeah, whatever, and it could be, yeah, whatever, or it could be, yeah, whatever. Right. So depending on how you read the exact same thing, yeah, whatever could be the most innocuous statement. But depending on how you're feeling, it could be like, oh my God, can you believe they said, yeah, whatever? Or they said, yeah, whatever, like excited. But depending on where you are in the world, you will take it in two different ways. And that's what makes it dangerous, is because it hooks you into a story that may or may not be true. That's why.
Like as someone that does all those emotions every single day, I
Yeah.
totally get that, because as a person with, like doing all these things and responding to emails or messages from friends, sometimes I'm like, okay, I like that's the happiest personality, and I'm like, why did they say that? Like, are you
Right.
serious? Like, come on. But it's like with social media, like to bring you back to TikTok, like TikTok did well. TikTok was the thing before the pandemic. I was on it. Like, it was Musically before it was TikTok.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it was like I think it was like I think it's transitioned like 2018 or 19, I think, around that time. But like when like it wasn't really popular per se. Like it was popular, but not like the biggest app in the world.
For
It
sure.
was until the pandemic that like it really skyrocketed. Everyone was on it 24/7, including me. I'm not afraid to say that I was one of those people.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
of course, with the pandemic, all you can do is be on social media, talk to your family on social media, whether it's like through Zoom, like we're doing right now, or FaceTime. Because I know that not everyone has a FaceTime if they have like a Samsung or something, and not everyone likes a FaceTime, especially in today's world. It
You
really
guys still
extreme.
basically text through Snap, right? Do you
Yeah.
guys most text? So you text through Snap and you take in content on TikTok. Now, I think initially with TikTok, with Musically, which Musically at the time was terrifying because so many little girls were getting Musically, and it was terrifying that they were. And it was harmless enough when it was like, oh, I'm just going to lip sync to music videos and music, right? It was like, here, I'm going to dance and it's a musical, and this is basically karaoke on a phone. But then it turned into where people get their news. And then it turned into a proliferation of everything. And humans in their psychology don't do well when they're in a big giant basket of everything, of chaos. Like humans can't possibly sift through all that information and then try to figure out who they really are and how to then even feel good. Like it's just like, for lack of a better term, you're thrown into a pile of manure and then said, can't you smell the roses? And you're like, no, because I'm in the bottom of turd pile. And no, I can't smell the roses. And then people say, well, can't you smell the roses? Why can't you smell the roses? And it's like, well, you sit at the bottom of this manure pile and then tell me if you smell roses.
Yeah, and like it like also with TikTok and like social media, it really, makes a lot of teenagers my age and maybe a little a couple years younger also self-confident about how they look and how they act based off of what they watch on TikTok, whether they're influencers or just people their age, maybe just a normal human being as they are. They can really feel like so confident based off of, oh, this person's prettier than me. Why can't I have their looks? Why can't I have their hair color? Like, it really also makes people self-confident about who they are and how they look.
Of course, it's built. So the way that it's built like in its construction digitally behind the scenes. It's built into fear. And so it operates in a place of you feeling afraid so that you will stay and scroll more to find a solution in that space. It's like, oh, if I just keep staying here, I'm going to find something funny, or it's something that's going to lift me up or something, but it's not wired that way. So how it's actually wired in the psychology and all social media, not just TikTok, it's wired to make you feel bad about yourself.
Exactly.
But then also then wired for you to rely on it for the answer to feel better about yourself. And so it does two things. It makes you feel like crap. And then it makes you convinced that the solution is still there for you to not feel like crap. And that's why it's counterproductive. And that's why I said it's a big pile of manure, because the rose in there is very difficult to pluck out, because for every one positive nugget, there's about 20 things that are telling you that you're not good enough. Like, it's telling you, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's telling you like, oh, I've got this life that by this picture or this video that this is all worked out. When in reality, all of it is false. It's probably everyone struggling on some level with who they are. And because we're human beings, and this goes back to the thesis that 99.9% of the world has an emotional pain point before your 10th birthday. So even if you had the most incredible parents and a great life, you still, everyone sort of has something. And I call it just the thorn before your 10th birthday. That thorn, you can think of it like a sliver that kind of stays in you. And if you've ever seen a sliver and you don't take it out, it can get red, and then it can get like I can't get it, and then you got to like kind of cut it to kind of get this sliver out. You kind of think about emotional pain. Everyone has a pain point before their 10th birthday. Everyone.
Everyone does that. I actually experienced one of those,
does.
actually, to be quite honest with you, like
Yeah.
emotional pain, whether it's like loss of a loved
Yeah.
one or just personal
Yes.
social media. Like, there's so many ways to deal with emotional pain.
Yes, exactly, honey. And like everyone has one. The difference is that most people think that their head can solve that emotional pain. And the reality is that your head can't. It actually is more of an emotional, spiritual to heal, not necessarily a mental logic construct. But emotional pain, if you think about it like a sliver that stays in the body, can become an abscess. It can become like a big giant sore. And then you go into social media or you go into these other places and people just pick at that sore, or they put salt on that sore. And the person on the other side doesn't know you have this sore, but you have it. And so what happens is then it starts to take over your thoughts. And then your thoughts become things, and then those things become truth. And then you're in the spiral of that. When really you have to kind of go back to where the thorn is, and you got to pluck it out. And if you pluck out the thorn, then the root can lie back down, and then you won't be susceptible to the addiction of social media or bad relationships or people being mean to you or self-sabotaging in any way. But right now, especially your generation, like you guys are in the wild. Like I feel extraordinarily empathic for any teenager today, because holy crap, you guys are in the wild. Like
100%. I'm literally 17 years old. I say that all the time.
You guys are in the wild, aren't you? Don't
Yeah,
you
we
feel
are.
like
I'm being so serious. We are in that. Like,
you are? And I feel so like I just want to take every teenager that I meet and hug them and like yank them out of there for a minute, because it's like it's got to be hard on your soul. Do you find it hard on your soul?
oh, 100%. Yeah. Like, as a person that grew up with anxiety and seeing other people like living their best lives and, judging other people, I'm just like, what am I doing with my life? This is why I think in my mind a million times each day.
But then look at you. You have a podcast. You're like going for it. You're doing all these things, but it's got to be so hard because you guys are in the wild. Like my generation, probably your mom's age or dad's age, like we grew up at a time before technology and then after. So we actually know what it's like to just be in our own shit, for lack of a better term, like to just be on our own, like go take care of your stuff. Like we kind of were raised as Gen Xers to be that way. You guys are you start your day, you're in it, you're in the wild, you've got the mean stuff. Like I would never have been able to navigate the mean stuff. Like my daughter's your age, and I will read what something happens and I'm like that can't be said to someone. Like that can't be said to someone. And you're on the other side of the screen, and I'm like, oh my God. Like you guys are in the wild.
Oh, we definitely are. And I even see like a bunch of kids younger than me act so, I can't find a word for it. It's like they act so different from when I was their age, which is
Yeah. So
absolutely
you're
crazy.
even seeing a difference from your age to another generation. So
Mhm.
imagine now, like, how much further away you get from what makes you special as a human being. And this is what I've studied 30 years, is that I have met with famous people. I've worked with athletes. I've worked with movie stars. I've worked with musicians, all on their healing journey. I've worked with people that are in drug addiction and recovery. I've worked with the wealthiest to the poorest and everything in between. And this
Mhm.
is what I know to be true. Every single person has a pain point that they need to solve within
Mhm.
themselves. And the pain point also is every single person has a calling, has a mission that they are specifically designed to. So my entire life's work is to every person I meet, for them to know that they have a calling, that they have a mission bigger than their imagination. That's my whole jam, that, you know, that they don't just stay in pain, that they transform their pain into their purpose, that they can use what happened to them into something that is magnificent. And I think everyone has it, including you. So it's like literally every single person I meet, I'm like, well, that's remarkable. And it's always true. I haven't met a person yet in all the years I've been doing this work that doesn't have a calling. Every single one has a calling. I've met a woman that's lost her children, who's been a heroin addict, who's trying to figure it out, who's just come out of jail. I've met women and men that are making hundreds of millions of dollars and they still don't feel like they have their calling. I've met famous people that do the work that they do and still don't feel like they matter. And so it's really across the board. Every single person has a calling. They all do.
Yeah. Yeah, like even if it's famous people, like I know with being so famous and with social media, it really also real makes people think like, oh, they're celebrities, they don't have feelings. Like they think they have
Yeah.
everything with a bunch of money, living in a mansion, like buying everything they want. But
No,
sometimes I'm like, I like wonder. I'm like, do celebrities like how like sometimes like I just get into that mindset like, oh, they don't feel those feelings, but at the same time, I'm like, well, even though they have fame, like people know who they are,
I can
but
tell
it
you,
doesn't
being
mean
in,
they don't
inside
feel.
of that, it does not. I've been inside that world and as an observer, and I can tell you that they have the exact same insecurities that anybody else does. They have the same doubts about whether they're loved as anybody else does. Lots of them are crippled with anxiety and mental health issues. Many of them, you know, do drugs. Many of them trying to figure out their way. Like, they're almost the same. The only difference between them and somebody else is that people know them because of social media more than, say, someone else who doesn't necessarily have the following. It's the only difference. In
Mhm.
some cases, because people don't see them as human beings anymore, because once you reach a certain level of fame, people just don't see your humanity. They
Mhm.
don't think you have this because you have money or you have beauty or you have the right boyfriend or the right house or the right job or the famous movie that just came out. But in every case, because I've been doing this work for so long, they all struggle with the same. Some people are so mean to themselves that even when they are at the pinnacle of their career, they still don't believe they deserve it. And so, even in those cases, and then we give people a device, and then the way that they're built, they allow cruelty. Cruelty is accepted in social media. Cruelty is an afterthought. We legitimately don't think that it's a problem. And yet, cruelty in social media has caused the death of many kids.
Oh,
Um,
100%, yeah.
100%. Like, it would, if I were in charge, having been in the tech industry for this long, I would have a zero tolerance for cruelty. But because they care about money, most of these platforms and people being there and staying there, they allow cruelty. If I was your generation, I would be protesting that more than I would be protesting anything else. I would want safe places to interact online. I would want no cruelty, like kicked off the bus cruelty. If you are mean to someone else, you are like, you're walking. Like, I would lock it down and be like, you don't get your privileges, because it's a privilege to be able to interact in the ways that you do.
Mm-hmm.
But their cruelty is allowed. And there's lots of psychological studies around when people are cruel in groups, what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't actually want to be cruel at times, but they can't help but be cruel. So
Mm-hmm.
you guys are in the wild. I'm full empathy for you and your generation for sure.
Thank you. Like honestly, it's honestly so painful at times. Even though I love social media and what it has to offer with meeting a variety of different people and connecting with people I know, but it's also like, what am I seeing at the same exact time? I'm like, okay, like this
Hard. And do you find yourself like, are you a sensitive person by nature?
Some points, yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes can be very sensitive, but at the same time, I just walk it off and be like, okay, this is a video that I saw, and I am not gonna recover. But it honestly depends on what I'm seeing and how I react to it. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, like this is video, this is normal. Like I'm just gonna, just move
Because
on.
you bravely put yourself out in a podcast all the time.
Yeah.
Like, you bravely do this beautifully, which I'm, again, not to be facetious because you're a professional in this case, but I'm really proud of you. Like that's really hard to do. That's hard to put yourself out in the world to do that. So well done. Well done.
Like,
well
and
done.
honestly, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. Like, I never say this, but it's honestly like very, difficult at times to release some episodes of the podcast. So I'm totally honest with you. Like, even having a podcast, I'm 17 years old. I love it. I love it so much. Like it's something I never knew I was doing at 17 years old, or nor at 14 when I started at 14. But it's like with social media, it can be very difficult in having a podcast at a young age. And to be like can be very difficult at 14 to 17 years old, even though I've been doing this for so long and I'm still learning. It
Yeah.
definitely can come with its pros and cons, 100%.
I can imagine. What made you decide to do a podcast?
Yeah, so basically, if people never know, basically I'm from northeastern Pennsylvania, and so basically I grew up with two cousins that work for a local news station here in Pennsylvania, and basically, I always grew up watching them on the news, and my aunt and I always been very close. I always watch on TV, and whenever we were at family gatherings, they would talk about all the stories they covered. And when I'm scrolling on social media, believe it or not, I would see all their posts and what they're up to with their work and like everything in the news like division has to offer. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool that you're doing that. And I was like, what? And sometimes I'm like, maybe I can be a journalist, but of course, with being a shy girl growing up from a small town, I felt like it was impossible. Like I thought it was, very impossible for a shy girl to be a journalist or even a podcast host. It really wasn't a thing from what I was seeing. But once the pandemic hit, I was like, I'm bored out of my mind. I'm tired of watching TV and being on social media all the time. Like, I was trying to figure out through that period what to do to keep myself busy during that time of COVID, and we weren't allowed really to leave the house. So I was like, I need to do something with my life. Like, I'm tired of not doing anything. And so basically, what in 2021 I was like, okay, like I know where I was like, what, I should start a podcast, like if for a couple of weeks until the pandemic's over, and then once the pandemic's over, you can go on and live your life, do something like live back your life like before COVID. And I was like, okay, well, I started for a couple of episodes. It won't last long because I'm the type of person that loves to quit things so easily. So I was like, okay, well, I'll start this. and we watch their, TV like segments and everything, and learn from in terms of what they do, and also watch other, journalists as well. But and yeah, so basically it started in 2021, and 2 years later, it's still going strong, which is very
Oh,
surprising.
great.
But
Are your parents super proud of you? Like, this is amazing.
yeah, they are super proud. I hope they are. I hope they are, but
This is amazing. Like, it takes an extraordinary human to decide that, hey, I'm going to do this, then to follow through and to then execute and put it into the world at your age over the last 2 years to sustain it. Plus, to take, I'm sure not everybody's nice to you when you put out an
oh,
episode, right?
yeah.
Like, because it's social media, people are cruel. But at the same time, for you to have the fortitude to do it. And so if you take nothing else from this call, you should be extraordinarily proud of yourself. Like,
Thank
this
you.
is very rare. I meet a lot of people who do a lot of things. This is very rare at your age to do this and to see it through. So, like, if nothing else, you should know that what you're doing is magnificent. That's really terrific.
No,
And
thank you.
you don't know where it's going to take you, right? So you could be from here to doing something else, to doing something else. Like, it's all a journey. So enjoy it, soak it up, like, be proud of yourself. And I'm sure it's hard,
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard putting yourself on your own out into the world. And not everybody receives things in a graceful way. Not everybody sees your path or your vision that you have for yourself. And that's the hard part when you start to strive for your dreams and your goals and your calling, is that a lot of people won't get it, and they don't need to get it. You need to get it. You need to be like, I'm doing this and damn the cost. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what anybody thinks. And it's hard because people always are addicted to telling people what they think. But
Oh,
I
100%. I literally can't
awesome.
tell you how many people have done that in the last 2 years of doing this. It's happened more than you could possibly say, to be quite honest.
Wow. Well, I think you're remarkable. And
Thank
I'm
you.
thank you for having me on. This has been so cool.
Of course. Thank you so much for
Good.
coming on. We
Yes,
definitely
of
have to do a part
course.
2 to talk about more things, but I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time. And thank you everyone for listening. I hope you guys learned a lot from this episode. I definitely sure did. I love filming this. This is definitely, I'm not saying that was for filming it, but it's definitely one of my favorite episodes I filmed so far. So I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time.
Okay. But
Everyone.
let's keep in touch, and let's see how you do on your world, and we'll see how I do over in my world. And I'm sure there'll be a time for us to collaborate again. So congratulations on this podcast. It's awesome. It's
Thank you
awesome.
so much. I appreciate that. If you ever need
Okay.
help with anything at all, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help.
Okay. Thank you.
Of
Thank so
course.
much. Okay.
Have
Good
a good
luck.
rest of your day.
Okay. Bye.